The problem was that people were listening with their eyes instead of their ears. Just take a second and just look at these amazing album covers. And it's incredible to think how quickly these things were produced in succession. This came out in 1976, this came out in 1976, and this came out in 1977. Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, Love Gun were all created within 15 months of each other. And for a lot of people, Kiss fans, and myself included, this is prime stuff. This is some of the best stuff Kiss ever did, these three albums. Now, I want you to take the music and set it aside for a second. I know a whole bunch of you just said gladly. Okay, but just for a second, take the music and set it aside and look at these album covers. These three covers, not only are they, I think, the best covers that Kiss ever made, these are some of the greatest album covers like ever in rock and roll. When you have this thing where they look like these marauding kind of superheroes, supervillains on this one, over here you have them looking like Greek gods. And then this like colorful graphic, this really original thing with Rock and Roll Over. I mean, this stuff was just absolutely incredible because Kiss understood the importance of the visual. And they made these just unbelievable album covers. They understood the power of things like album covers. And you remember what it was like? You'd buy a record and you'd take these things home and you would just study them. It was part of the experience. The visual part of music and listening to albums and bands and musicians and performers was a big part of all this thing. So now, go forward with Kiss here. So now we have these three albums. Well, what comes out next? Alive 2 comes out, also in 1977. Okay, then in 1978, Double Platinum, which is basically a big best of album, comes out. And then in 78, we have the 4 solo albums. I mean, look at all this production, all this stuff they're putting out. Then in 1979, Dynasty comes out, which is they're at their peak. This is as big as they're ever going to get. That thing sells like crazy, hit songs. Anyway, so here they are, giant. Then they put out the album Unmasked, and they slip a little bit. Then Music from the Elder, and they slip kind of a lot more. And then they put out Killers, and then they put out Creatures of the Night. And on that tour, they're playing to half-filled houses. Tickets aren't selling so well. Things aren't going very well for them. And so they get to this point where there's this feeling of desperation where they feel like they have to take the makeup off. And Paul Stanley approaches Gene and says, I think it's time. We need to just be a band, see if we can succeed just on our musicianship, on being a band. Let's get rid of the makeup and move forward. And this is the part I wanted to share with you. Because every time I've ever heard him talking about this, he always says the same thing. Now listen to what he says about why they needed to do this. I find this so fascinating. The problem was that people were listening with their eyes instead of their ears. Now, just marinate in that sentence for a second. The problem was people were listening with their eyes instead of their ears. Look at these albums. I thought that was the entire point. If there was ever a band, if there were ever people that understood that people listen with their eyes and not their ears, it was Kiss. Their entire career was built on the fundamental understanding that people react to how things look, to the visual. And here Paul Stanley is stating it as a problem. The problem was that people were listening with their eyes. That was actually the solution. That's what got you where you were in the first place. That's what made you famous. I mean, think about it. When Gene Simmons, when they started the band, he said that they wanted to be the band that they had never seen. Not the band that they had never heard. They weren't blazing trails in their music. They weren't doing anything new or original with their music. The music was good. There's no question about that. They had great rock and roll. There was fantastic songs in there. But they understood that people listen with their eyes. And I think it's so fascinating then. Paul Stanley, they get to the point that the band is falling apart. And what's the thing? The problem is the very thing that made us famous in the first place. Now, I know there were other complicating factors, like, Kiss, there was overexposure and there was fatigue because we had Kiss everywhere, all day, every day. We were seeing Kiss, and so people were getting a little bit tired of it. But it's still fascinating that Paul is calling this a problem when it was the thing. When you look at these albums, this was all part of the magic. This is all part of what sold them, and we all knew it. Now, I'm going to read this newspaper article to you, and if you're a Kiss fan, you're going to find this particularly fascinating. Matter of fact, you don't even have to be a Kiss fan to get this, because this is an outsider's point of view, where a reporter on the outside looking in understands this issue and talks about it. And I think you're going to find this really, really fascinating.